What is going on? It's Alex coming back at you with another video, and today we're going to be breaking down PFF's brand new 2025 NFL mock draft. If you are new, feel free to like, comment, and subscribe. Below my face is my board. It is brutally honest, is being updated as we speak. We're going to be going through all the positions, and I just dropped a top 41, kind of 42 corner video. Yes, that is correct. You heard it right. 41 corners, each with their own scouting report that I break down in the video. I actually break down a whole game for you guys, so go and check that out. It is just under 90 minutes long, and it is extremely unique, and corners a position I really love, so that's why you might see some more corners on this, and why I might be a little bit more informed on the corners as to exactly how much I love them right now compared to maybe some other positions. But let's get involved. Well, I mean, I guess you can get involved with me by going to that link tree. You're 2 clicks away from going anywhere, including my X page where I put all 22 clips that, makes my board make sense because I end up backing everything that I say with as much evidence as possible. And then, of course, you can go and use that UnderDog Fantasy link to get up to $1,000 when you sign up in bonus cash. And they send me $60. So it's honestly full transparency there, but also I use the app on a daily basis, weekly basis. I don't have a problem yet. Play legally, play responsibly. Let's go. So apparently PFF has a deal. I'm not here to promote them in any way, shape, or form until they start paying me. But number one overall, this is not a Trevor Sikkema mock draft. I was all excited to see if this was Trevor's, but it is Gordon McGinnis. Never met him. I mean, let's just see what he does. I'm not going to have a negative negative outlook on his video or on his mock draft damn, English is hard today, ain't it? I'm not going to have a negative bias right now. Okay. Let's start out with the number 1 pick. Jaguars go Travis Hunter. I see a lot of negative comments saying this guy's only being hyped up because of the amount of snaps he takes. I would say there is some logic to that, but I think that we must also understand that Travis Hunter is a top 3 receiver and he is a top 3 corner in the class. And it's not like he doesn't belong in the top 10, right? I have him sitting there at number 8 on my board. And so, I mean, I know that's sacrilegious to a lot of people, but at the same time, it is very true. He gets rewarded for playing 2 positions really well. You're probably only going to play one and maybe a couple snaps of another at the next level, right? So if he does fall, that's the reasoning why, but he's still a talented player, and trying to say that he's not because, people think that the only reason he gets love is his snap count is a bit diabolical. So want to clear that up right there. I think Jacksonville could use him on either side of the ball. We'll see which one he'd end up working out in, but Travis Hunter, really good player. And then when you're at a state where you're with at Jacksonville, you're in a position where I think it's best to look at just getting good players. And Travis, will be a good player. So he's not going to be a busted pick in my opinion. And at the very minimum, your goal in the first round is to select someone who's impactful for you, who's not a bust. And I don't think the Jacksonville Jaguars have much of a chance of Travis Hunter really busting out. Well, maybe busting out, but instead of busting. At number 2, the New York Giants go Shedeur Sanders. So we got the Colorado boys going 1 and 2. I think that, I have Shedeur number 1 overall on my board for quarterbacks, not actually overall, but he's my number 1 quarterback. You guys know my opinion. If you are new, I don't think that any of the quarterbacks are worth starting out the gate without a system being implemented for them. I think that none of them are system proof, right? Last year, I had several quarterbacks higher. Shedeur is my QB1. Again, I want to reemphasize that, but I think Shedeur would have graded out as QB 6 or 7 in last year's class. So I really do want to heavily emphasize the fact that as much as I like Shedeur, I think that there's a good chance if they end up slipping out of the top 10, they could be late first round picks. It would not surprise me one bit if the New York Giants end up saying, hey, we want a really high second round pick. That's why we're tanking, so that we can go to the late first and get a guy. That wouldn't surprise me if that actually ends up happening, right? But for the time being, it makes a lot of sense for the Giants, who will probably have a new system in there, new coaches, new GM. All love to those guys, and they seem like really chill dudes. I'd love to grab a beer with Brian Dable. I'd love to smoke a cigar with them as well as Joe Shane. They all look like excellent human beings. So this is not an indictment on their actual character or persons, but just asset management wise, when you're able to draft as well as they have, it's surprising to me that, in the 4th round, they went Theo Johnson instead of Spencer Rattler. At the very minimum, you could have done that. The neglect for their quarterback position has been atrocious. Like, a lot of their big moves have been atrocious. So, I think that it is their time. And that doesn't mean that they should be out of a job for good. I think that it might be just time for reevaluation and then a new standard. And so I think the New York Giants should be going in a new direction. Shedeur Sanders is the highest floor quarterback in the class, and it's a pretty clear 1-2 at the moment. It's Shedeur and Cam. So the Vegas Raiders end up getting the air quotes sloppy seconds, but it doesn't really matter. It just really is similar to, you go to an ice cream shop and you see chocolate chip cookie dough or mint chocolate chip. It doesn't mean one's better than the other. I'm more of a cookie dough guy myself, but you will still have people who will end up liking the mint chocolate chip over the chocolate chip cookie dough. Some people like the higher floor, less athletic talent, but, better processor in Shedeur Sanders. And some people like the more athleticism, the bigger arm, the bigger playmaking ability that Cam Ward brings to the table. So it really has to balance out those two factors. And again, both these guys would end up being probably like my QB 7 and 8 of last year's class. So I think that they should be late first round picks. That's where I'm at. At number 4, the Titans. Jesus. The New England Patriots go Teteroa McMillan. For me, I think this is fine if you don't get T. Higgins. I know that you guys have been very vocal in saying even if you get T. Higgins, just, have an embarrassment of riches at receiver. I can understand that. I mean, to a degree, your receiving core is very underdeveloped, but I also think that Patriots fans, especially if you get T. Higgins, have some patience. Like, Javon Baker's still on your team, and he's not even taking receiver reps, but I really do think he could be, like, nearly as good, if not better, than Jalen Polk. And Jalen Polk's getting reps, and he's not, like, an absolute bust. I wasn't a fan of him at the top of the second, and he's proving not to be worth the top of the second pick. But it's not like he's ass. Like, I don't think he should be considered as butt cheeks or something. And so I would just more so caution patience and allow those guys to develop if you bring in a good veteran. If you don't, then T-Mac makes a ton of sense. Then you get the Carolina Panthers going Abdul Carter at 5. This dude's doing a fantastic job this year. Even though this past week he didn't get 8 pressures, he ended up getting just like 3 or 4. He still is just a consistent threat there for Penn State. And it's the reason why they're able to win games on the defensive side. Like, I don't think they have a legitimate top-end talent at most of their positions the way they normally did, right? They used to have JPJ. You look in the safety core, I don't even think that Kevin Winston's even back yet. So Jaquan Brisker, Kevin Winston, like, they've had legitimate difference makers. Abdul at linebacker, but you also talk about I'm forgetting the other guy who ended up going, I believe, UDFA. But you've had difference makers all over the defense that isn't really present this year. You got Kobe King, I believe is his name, and then like Zane Durant. Like, those are the guys outside of Abdul Carter who are making plays, and it's just pretty obvious that a lot of the defensive success can really be hinged on Abdul Carter really developing way faster than he should have. So I think it's a great move for the Panthers. Titans then go Will Johnson. I don't think corner is a massive need for the Titans, but there's nothing wrong with continuing to reinforce a strong position of value with great value. And it might not actually move the needle, but I think Will Johnson is just a super, like, unbelievably talented corner. And again, I have a whole entire hour-and-a-half video out breaking down 41, technically 42 corners. And, feel free to go check it out. It'll explain exactly what I think of each guy and why Will Johnson is just someone who I fell in love with. At number 7, we got the New York Jets going Jalen Milroe at 7. I ended up having a little bit of a rant from when it comes to Jalen Milroe yesterday on my breaking down the best and worst performances of the week. So feel free to check it out as well. It's an elongated reasoning as to why I really think Jalen Milroe needs to return to school. Like, bottom line, he has not developed as a passer at all, remotely compared to a lot of the other guys in this class. And you can't just draft someone who's going to play that Justin Fields role for the Steelers. It's just, he needs to go to the right situation. I don't really trust the Jets at the moment to be that. And for Jalen Milroe's sake, for our sake, for the organization's sake, I think it's best for all parties for Jalen Milroe to go back to school. At number 8, we got the Cleveland Browns going Mason Graham. I mean, if he's here, it's not going to be a bad idea at all. Because if you actually think about it, right now, one of the highest pass rush win rate defensive interiors is Michael Hall, who they drafted in the second round last year. So you're going to get another player who is very similar in that regard in terms of the explosiveness, the pass rushing, and the skill set that could be really, really, really dangerous when you combine it with Myles Garrett and the developing edge core that they have. I would say you could actually mention edge as one of the positions the Browns could be intrigued with Nick Scorton if he continues to be red hot. At number 9, the Saints go. Speaking of Nick Scorton. So, he's a really, really solid edge rusher who's done a very good job that in recent memory. Like, he had a slow start to the year. The majority of Texas A&M did, for that matter. But Nick Scorton's been the top performer pretty much every single week. When you look at pressures, when you look at defensive stops, this dude's just been very, very reliable. So, shout out to Nick, who he was, I believe, a top 3 player for me at the start of the year. Easily will be bouncing back when we get back to the edge rushers. At number 10, we got Cincinnati Bengals going Luther Burden. And interesting because Luther's a slot guy. T. Higgins going to be gone. I don't really think that Luther would be the type of receiver I would place in T. Higgins' stead. I think there's a lot of receivers in this class, even if you want to wait to round 2 with Jaden Higgins. But even beyond that, there are the guys like Pat Bryant, for example, that I think could fill T. Higgins' role, and not to the talent level of T. Higgins, but to a expected degree of loss for far significantly less value. For Luther Burden, you're putting him in the slot, and you really lost that big, outside of course, Jamar Chase, that contested catch threat. And like Luther Burden is someone who I really, really love in the slot. I would love for him to be in this system, but you're essentially now saying Jermaine Burton, you're going to be held to an extremely high regard. Andre Iosivas, you're going to be an extremely highly valued weapon on the outside, and I don't know if I'm ready to admit that. And especially at 10, I just think that's a little bit early for me. Ashton Jeanty goes to the Cowboys at 11. I mean, I'm not gonna complain about this one. He will be going probably in the top 5. People don't want to admit it, but it's just what can happen. I mean, the only reason he'd be out of the top 5 is based on draft order, draft need, etc. But Ashton Jeanty is the best running back that we've seen, like the best pure running back that we've probably seen since probably beyond Saquon. Saquon's just better as an all-around running back talent because of the receiving aspect. But as the running aspect of the running back, this is the best guy we've seen. And we're seeing that, even with King Henry at his age, like that's not an elite receiver. You want to highlight somebody. Let's talk about Derrick Henry here. You're essentially going to be getting Derrick Henry production with a lot. Like you're getting a combination of Derrick Henry as well as Saquon Barkley with Ashton Jeanty based on the athleticism, the contact balance, but also the home run hitting ability. And maybe if you just said Saquon Barkley minus a little bit less athleticism and less receiving ability, that'd make a lot of sense for Ashton Jeanty. But you can't just try to bring up the fact that he's not an elite receiver, which I think he had over 500 yards the year before as a receiver. It's just this year they're using him primarily as a running back. That you're going to discredit it because you have King Henry there. So I think this is a great move for the Cowboys. It's just I think he will be going in the top 5 to 10. People who want to continue disagreeing with that, I mean, I'm hoping that I'm the one who gets humbled just because of the fact that this class has some good guys down the board. But legitimately, every single time this happens, like Jahmyr Gibbs was hinted to be 6, then you also had Bijan Robinson at 8. Every time we're like, what? I mean, at a certain point when all the evidence is stacking up towards something and you're just continuing to ignore it, it's no longer ignorance, it's arrogance. So I think based on trends, it's pretty easy to see that Ashton Jeanty will be a top 5 to 10 pick. Then we have the Chicago Bears going Kenneth Grant. I think with the quantity of offensive linemen on the board, I'd prefer to go that route. I love Josh Simmons. To me, I would, even after the season-ending injury, would still take him for the Bears, put him at guard, and then allow him to be able to be the tackle if he wants to be. I think the fact that the goal would be Josh Simmons become a tackle, and then we at least have a short-term role for you until we find something else. But Kenneth Grant, if you end up with him, I'm not going to complain. The freakish athleticism that you'll get between him and Gervin Dexter would be ridiculous. And defensive interior pressure is very, very coveted, and it's very underrated as well. So I think that the Bears wouldn't be wrong with going Kenneth Grant so long as you can tell that the board is going to fall in a way where you could still get really good value at offensive line. Colts then go Malachi Starks at 13. perfectly fine with me. He's a top end defensive back. And, you're again talking about what I did with Travis Hunter. You can't afford to bust out when the Colts have so many different pieces in progress. So just getting somebody that is going to be an asset on your team really can be the difference between like 2 different games of being a win or a loss, just being able to have that minute increase. And I'm not even saying Malachi is a minute increase, but I'm just saying floor-wise, Malachi will improve your team. And, it's your job as a GM to maximize value. And if Malachi is going to be starting right away, you need to make sure he's good, right? And you're not really taking much of a swing. Malachi Starks is probably close to as sure as it gets at the defensive back position. Miami Dolphins and go Will Campbell, great value. Will Campbell to me is a guard, but he does have the potential to be a tackle. Like, I like the idea of trying him at tackle before kicking him to guard. The problem is, first off, you're already saying F you to the guy that you drafted in the last draft in the 2nd round in Patrick Paul. So I would say that's a strong message to Patrick Paul that they don't trust him. I love the fact that Will Campbell, you should put him at guard early on. And then when injuries happen, you can trust him as a tackle to be able to take over. I'd prefer that mentality. If you draft Will Campbell, which you might say is a guard at 14 worth it, it's a good question to ask. But when it starts to get to a point where you're looking at your immediate return on investment of a true starter, get that right. Throw positional value relatively out the window when you're talking about a true starter. Just get the best player. And then over time, I'm sure you'll be able to fill most positions with good talent if you're getting the best player available rather than just trying to play money ball. So get Will Campbell. I think that's perfectly fine. You're getting a top end talent, and even adjusted for guard value, I still have Will Campbell as 11th on my board. Then you got the Buccaneers going James Pierce. I love it. I think you should go way earlier. He's my number 2 player on the board, and I could see him climbing even higher in terms of gaining the separation from 3 and 4. Of course, 3 and 4 are both season-ending injuries, and those grades do not reflect their season-ending injury. Rams then go Josh Simmons at 16. I think it's a beautiful move. Josh Simmons was doing an unbelievable job this past year developing. He already was like more so the show don't tell type of guy in terms of looking good, and then didn't really produce in 2023. This year, he took that massive step up, and I absolutely love it. At 17, the Niners go Ben Morrison. Again, Ben Morrison, my number 3 player. I ended up breaking him down as well in that hour-and-a-half corner video, so I want you guys to... I am ushering you guys over there. The amount of work that goes into that, I think, is like, it's one of my most proud pieces of work, which is why I keep emphasizing it, but also it describes it so much better than I can do in this video. So for me, I think Ben Morrison should return because he's a true junior, season-ending hip injury. He should be a top 10 pick. He's not super duper small. He's 6 foot 190 essentially, 186, but he's still extremely physical. He's someone who can stick to you in man coverage and not give up. He also is extremely smart in zone. Like, he's just a really damn good corner. So I do think it's actually like a disservice to him to try to keep putting him in the first round, but I totally understand it. I mean, when you can have a great player like Ben Morrison, you don't want to like restrict yourself from being able to take him. And for the Niners, I think it's a beautiful, beautiful move to be able to replace Ward essentially with Morrison, which, yes, you have Renardo Green there. You also have Diamador Lenoir, excuse me. But I mean, corners, you can't just have 2. And so I don't think that corner in the first round is out of the picture. I think Ben Morrison's a great pick. Cardinals and go Emeka Egbuka 18. I'm going to disagree with this one pretty heavily. I just don't see the value in Emeka Egbuka pairing up with Michael Wilson, Marvin Harrison for the 18th overall pick with the massive issues that they're dealing with the actual really good value that they have with Walter Nolan, with Jalen Walker. I mean, those 2 alone can outclass Emeka 10-1. Like, one of those 2 can outclass him 10-1. Like, I just don't see the return on investment there. And yes, like, wide receiver 3 could be something that really is heavily used in this offense, but you're forgetting that wide receiver 2 isn't actually Michael Wilson. It's Trey McBride. And so when you end up adding Emeka, you're adding the 4th receiving option. And it's not like, hey, this is Tetairoa McMillan at 18, right? Like, this isn't like, oh shit, like this is way too good to pass on. This is essentially reaching for a very solid receiver, but it's in a very deep receiving class. at a position that doesn't return you really any sort of value. It's not like Emeka's a deep threat where he can outclass Michael Wilson and Marvin Harrison Jr. and be like, for the Steelers, the Calvin Austin of that offense. You want to talk Isaiah Bond? That's the only guy I could see some sort of brand new created value where you can add new plays in. I don't see that with Emeka Egbuka for this offense specifically. So, yeah, definitely not going to agree with that one, even though love Emeka from the bottom of my heart. As much as it sounds like I shit on him, I do love him. You guys know I'm an Ohio State fan, and because I have some Ohio State alum in my family. But Arizona Cardinals, I don't think need him. At number 19, the Falcons go Jalen Walker. I would love to see him in a hybrid edge linebacker role for the Falcons as he continues to polish up. I definitely think this could be one of the best moves they can make. At 20, the Seahawks go Kelvin Banks. Ridiculously good move. You can kick him into guard while Abe Lucas is, actually healthy. But again, just similar to what I talked about earlier with Ashton Jeanty, when you start looking at history and it's continuing to show you a certain result and you continue to ignore it, it's no longer ignorance, it's arrogance. We've seen Abraham Lucas get injured time and time again. So ignoring it just because he starts looking good because he's a good player, and we all know he's a good player, he's a second round pick, is like, we can't ignore it, right? We know that he's a good player. It's the health that's the reason, not the talent. And so Kelvin Banks is a great move because you have him as a guard while Abe is healthy. And you have a contingency plan for when he's not. And actually, that would give value to not only Kelvin Banks, but Abe Lucas, because no longer are you letting the team truly down by not being consistently healthy, because we don't have to substitute some bum at right tackle. I'm not saying that's what you guys do, but essentially, like, talking about it in a very over-exaggerative way, I'm saying that at least if Abe is not healthy, they're not screwed. And so that is actually something that's both great for Abe Lucas as well as the Seahawks organization. I think if Kelvin Banks is there, it's a no-brainer. At 21, the Commanders go Arianti Ursary. So, I mean, I need to do a better job of keeping up with the rookie watch, but I did see some good flashes there from Brandon Coleman this year. I'm not going to disagree, though. If you can upgrade the offensive line, Ursary is going to be a great steal. At 21, I think it's a really good value. Even though I don't have him top 20 on my board, I think that the value of offensive line, especially in this class where offensive tackle is very limited, should be a little bit more willing to reach on, because I also think he's going to be a quality interior offensive lineman if he struggles early until he actually gets to develop to that point. Alfred Collins goes to the Texans at 22. Defensive interior, regardless, is the right move. Alfred Collins has had a lot of really good games. I could see this being Caleb Banks, who's been getting a ton of love. Defensive interior probably should be my next position. I fully grade out just because it's been the one who's been lacking the most in terms of reevaluation. So I'll put that on me. Obviously, I'm a one-man show, but, just ended up reevaluating that whole corner class, the whole quarterback class. Wide receiver is going to be a fun one, but I've already reevaluated a lot of the top talent just so I can end up making sure that I am up to date on a lot of stuff. But regardless, defensive interior definitely is a position where I feel like I need to learn the most. And so Alfred Collins, as much as I love him, did not end up seeing him being worth a first-round pick. I haven't seen it from many other people, especially over guys like Walter Nolan. At number 23, the Broncos go Colson Loveland. I think that tight end's a good option for the Broncos. I just don't think Sean Payton could resist the option of Tyler Warren, who is a much better built tight end. And so I would just say good position, probably would choose a different player. Then we have the Baltimore Ravens going Darian Porter. Darian Porter was, he's like number 33 on my board, number 34 overall on my board right now. And of course, there's other players who should be dropping. So he might end up being top 30 when all is said and done. Darian Porter is a fantastic corner, unbelievably light feet at 6'4". He's just extremely inexperienced. And so we'll see what happens with him. But the Ravens getting him wouldn't surprise me one bit. Chargers get their deep threat in Isaiah Bond. It's a pick I made multiple times. Do I think there might be some better options than Isaiah Bond? Sure. But I also, you guys know how much I love Isaiah Bond. He's at 13th overall on my board. Steelers then go Trey Harris at 26. I'm just not the biggest Trey Harris guy. I think he's a really, really good college wide receiver. I think he'll be a solid NFL receiver, not something that would really blow my socks off. And so I know that, because that's the thing, 5.15 yards per route run this season is absolutely ridiculous. And he's feasted on a lot of college corners. But I just did not get that vibe from him when I first watched him, that this guy is going to be a super stud in the NFL. Now, I need to update that, of course, but I mean, I've watched a lot of Ole Miss this year. I still do not get that from Trey Harris for a first round pick. Again, this is the big asterisk. We have a whole, like, talking about a player holistically, I really like Trey Harris. But when we're talking about first round talent, which are guys who should be on your team for that second contract, who need to be a difference maker, like, that is something I don't see yet with Trey Harris. And I would love to see it in time, but I just haven't really seen it at the NFL translatable level just yet. Packers and go Tyleik Williams. I honestly can't disagree. I'd prefer to go after corner here for Jeff Hafley's system because there's a lot of really good press man corners in this draft. But, Tyleik Williams, you can't really go wrong. Again, it's another player that is just super high floor. Siobhan Revell goes at 28 to the Vikings. Just one of those guys who I have not been able to get any hands on all 22 this year. So I think he's honestly, if based on everything I've heard, he's really heavily hinging on 2023 tape because he only played a couple games this year. And so I don't really know if he's necessarily going to be a first round pick. I do think it's going to be a little bit overshadowed just based on the fact that a lot of other corners are putting out some good tape this year. And Siobhan is coming off an ACL and didn't really have any tape this year. So we'll see what happens, but I think the Vikings getting a good boundary corner is always a good thing. So I'm not going to have any issues if this does happen. I just might have an issue with it being Siobhan over maybe a player who I consider is better. Mikael Williams goes to the Eagles at 29. That's a dream pick for them with Josh Sweat probably going to be heading out. Eric, probably. He might not. BG broke my heart knowing that he's out for the year with that tricep injury. But Josh Sweat could be brought back based on the state of his knee, I think is in question. So some teams might not want him. So he probably could be a relatively inexpensive ad. And even if they keep him, Mikael Williams is going to be someone who I think could be a really good developmental piece there. The Bills and go Princey Uman Mielen. I think getting a second edge rusher for the future is a very smart idea. Not going to disagree with that at all. And then at 31, you got the Chiefs going Tyler Warren. He should go a lot earlier, but, the Chiefs are pretty much playing. They're just playing unbelievable. I'm not playing, but they're just doing a great job accepting what's come to them with excellent value. Sounds a lot like what the Ravens used to do, where they're just like, well, this player's not really supposed to be here. We're going to take him, and then end up building one of the better rosters in the NFL. And then the Kansas City Chiefs would be very smart to do that as well with Tyler Warren. At 32, the Lions then go LT Overton. And LT Overton's a guy with only a year of legitimate experience because Texas A&M, we all know, before the whole entire regime shift, they really screwed their players over in terms of development. And that's why LT has taken a massive step up rather than what he was doing there at Texas A&M. So I don't know. I think the whole entire Bama squad, Damani Jackson, LT Overton, now Deontay Lawson's out for the year as well. And then Jalen Milroe, of course. I think they should all return. Make a legitimate championship push. And I think it would boost all of their stocks. This is a deep edge class. So LT Overton could go much higher than this, but he also can go much lower depending on if teams are comfortable with that 1 year sample size. So that's going to be the video. Thank you so much for watching. I love you. See you on the far side. Peace.